I thought it would be nice if we came back to some of the things we were talking about earlier in the year. So these are the Rhododendron Cornish Red stock plants that we have inside. Ideally they'd be in a cooler area outside, but as you can see, where they've had the flower buds removed and where we've taken cuttings before, all the side shoots now are starting to grow up, and these will be this year's cuttings. It's now March, so we should actually get a second lot of cuttings from the base as well. These two are our new stock plants. We have Cornish red growing in the garden, but it's nice to have a small, neat, easy to access plant to take the cuttings from. And it's also nice to have fresh, new material all the time. There is the problem that the Rhododendron Cornish Red in the garden is about 30 or 40 feet high. That's another slight problem when you're collecting cuttings. The older stock plants here, as you can see, they've gone very, very woody. They really need to go out and be in the ground. They're showing signs of stress related to nutrition. They're also getting there's the odd little bit of fungal infection, and there's inevitably evidence of weevils taking a few bites. They've been fed, they've been watered, they've had the roots trimmed, they've been looked after, but they now have come to the end of their viable life. They're not much use to us now, but once they're in the ground, they will make wonderful plants. When we spoke about doing Cornish red cuttings earlier in the year, I spoke about putting them in cells, but we also put some of them in the bench here. And we try and fit them in between other cuttings. And we also have things like the Sparmania here, which root very quickly. So when one thing like early camellias are taken out, we'll just put in hydrangeas or Sparmanias to fill the gap. So they've been in about 2 months probably. They'll be well rooted, they'll be like that, so they need to be potted up. But just referring back to the Cornish red, I mentioned about reducing the amount of transpiration on the cutting, so you trim the leaf back a bit, and we used a fungicide to prevent the fungal spores that are in the atmosphere getting into the leaf. So you can see these are all nice and clean. There's 1 or 2 places where we slipped up. If you look at that, you can see there's a little bit of damage coming in there. So that needs to be removed with clean tools and then treated with a fungicide again. I also mentioned that sometimes it's easier to take an entire leaf off. So when we did that, we actually, if I point at this is actually something else, it's not a rhododendron, but we actually cut, if we were going to take the leaf off, we were very careful not to pull it off. But we cut it about 1 centimetre away from the stem, and I mentioned that it will die back naturally. So if you were to look here, you can see where it's died back, and now you can just go like that. That has got a perfect seal made by the plants. There's no fungal infection got in there at all. That's fine. It's just died off naturally, and the hormones in the plant have sealed that up. We'll just go next door and have a look at a couple of potted up ones, and then we'll go on to have a look at something else. That's actually a Daphne-phyllum macropodum. I've always struggled to get that to grow. So Skylar, I think, we only had a few pieces, but she put practically the entire cutting material in as cutting. So they do look really good compared to normal. So hopefully they will work. We've also got Viburnum Rhododendron. These were camellias that were put in an area of bench which has a bit of a failure with the heating in one of the areas down the end of the bench. And although they've calloused, they haven't rooted, they're not as far on as they should be. So we replaced the soil in this bit of bench and we evicted them from down there, brought them here. You just sort of wash them off and then dip them again in a little bit of, I say it's hormone rooting powder, but it's actually predominantly talcum powder. And then they've been put back in there. They will be fine. They'll start rooting really quickly now. And there's a couple of odd things as well that I think they're a type of quercus, but I do need to put the labels on that. Right. Okay, this is just to show you one of the Cornish red that we potted up a couple of weeks ago. So that, I'm just trying to think, it's March now. That would have been done probably July, August time, but it's got a nice decent root ball in there. I'm tempted to tip it out and show you, but I don't think that's really very helpful. But that's going to grow on now quite happily. It needs a bit of light shade, and it really needs to go out in a much colder environment. It's much too humid in here, and we had to put this bubble wrap up just to cover the cold spells when we had the frost, because we are actually several degrees colder in this area than anywhere else in the nursery. And here we also, you can see some of Asher's scented rhodos that she's propagated, that we've just potted up. So eventually all this will be filled up along here, and then we'll take all this down, put up a bit of light shade, and we will have much more fresh air blasting its way through.